Google at the time, and I'd always wear a Google baseball cap. And I would always meet people in 2000 and 2001 who thought this was the coolest thing. So I started giving away baseball caps. There was one person who really literally wanted to trade shirts. I drew the line at that. But basically what I used to do then is I used to travel with a whole bunch of baseball caps and Google shirts. And then I'd have business cards, and if I ran out, I'd get people's cards. I'd give them my card and say, email me, and then my associate would send this stuff out. So and this was just like really, really interesting. And the best one of all was coming back one night I was in 9C. I own 9C on the small United planes that go up to San Jose. I personally have paid for that seat. Okay, Google never paid my commuting. I had to do that. And I sat down. The plane was filled with Marines who had still dusty. They had just come back from Afghanistan. And then this very tall, good-looking woman walks into the plane, last seat, comes down, sits down next to me, and I hear under the old guy got the guy. And I thought,
classic.
And so we were talking. So
were you wearing the hat?
I was wearing the hat. I gave her my hat. Talked to her, what do you do? And she worked at the Spearmint Rhino here.
Wow.
And I said, oh, are you an exotic dancer? And she said, yes, I am. And then all the Marines were. Wow. And so the net result of this was she met the Marines. I got invited to be there the next night. I got to the gate. My wife said to me, what are you smiling about?
Wayne, was she wearing the hat?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She was off with the Marines. They were all fighting over who was going to carry her bag. And so I did not follow up on that. But that was a classic.
Yeah.
That was just classic.
But you actually did do some work in those 5 years. You took engineering from 80 people to almost 800.
Well, it was more than that. 1,500 or so at April 1st, 2005. That's the day I announced I was leaving.
How involved were you in the hiring?
I was very involved in the hiring. In the first year, everyone in engineering who was hired, with very rare exceptions, at the tail end of their interview day, if people thought they were really going to be good, then I would interview. And then the way we did this was Larry and Sergey and I and Eric, if he was around, we would sit down on an executive staff meeting every Monday and review every resume and all the reports of all the interview people. And we would talk through candidates. The people we didn't want to hire would not be presented at the meeting, and I would say only about 70% of the presentations resulted in a subsequent offer. It was an incredibly rigorous hiring.
Yeah. So there were definitely a lot of instances where they came to you, highly recommended, everyone had approved them, and then you said no.
Relatively rarely would I say no. A few times I said no, but usually I was looking for a certain thing that I would really get cautious about.
What were you looking for?
I was looking for engineering is a social process, and highly creative engineering at the scale that Google does it cannot be done by one person. So people have to be able to be communicative, they have to be brilliant, but they have to be able to interact with other people. And many engineers and scientists have this skill, and some of them lack it. And so if you hire someone who lacks it, you have to really have your head screwed on straight as to who you're hiring and why you're hiring that skill, because the people won't necessarily fit into the organization. And we didn't want to have to manage a bunch of strange people.
Yeah.
We didn't have any management. I was it. So the idea instead was to have people who could self-manage. And if you're self-managing in a social organization, you have to be able to be social and interact with people in a coherent way. And so that was the key thing I looked for.
A lot of small businesses, mine included, with less than 30 employees, we've got typical people problems that we deal with that slow us down or even stop us for a while.
Right.
But with 800 direct reports, how was that? I mean, what'd you do? How did you get anything done?
Well, when the background on this was fairly early on in the process, we essentially said, engineering will not have management. It will have me. And my job then was to sort of create an environment where 1,000 flowers would bloom. And so we did that with hiring, with some simple processes about how you told people what you were doing and how you documented what you were doing, and clear communication from Larry and Sergey and I as to what the top priorities of the company were at any given time. And we tried to talk about strategic priorities, not what was important today, but what was critically important to happen a year from now and two years from now. We'd send the message about what was important, and the organization self-organized around attacking the problems based on interest and enthusiasm. And that basically worked. And then Urs, my predecessor, this clever guy who got out of this job, he was the one who would go back and knock heads technically and really work through the really deep, hard technical issues. And then I sort of worked the problem of how to make it scale and how to keep the communication running and how to sort of balance off the founders, because the founders had a little bit of a tendency to say no, and that's not a good idea. And no is the most destructive word in the world when you're trying to be creative, and yes is the most empowering word. So you have to kind of balance that off.
It sounds like a lot of tenets of entrepreneurship. It seems like you hired folks that either had it in them to be entrepreneurs or were, and found a way to put them into a flow zone within the culture that they could.
Right.
They could, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a lot of the people who came into Google could or would or will be entrepreneurs of various forms. And one of the most amazing things that would happen, we would have new college hires come in, and within sometimes a week or two, they would be the leads on projects.
Really?
Because the more senior engineers figured out what better thing to delegate than all the management. Okay. And so it was truly amazing sometimes to sit in a review with someone literally 2 or 3 weeks out of college, managing a project that actually was critical to the success of the company. And it was really fun.
And some of those guys are just born with it.
As I say, engineering is a social phenomenon. You just have to sort of know how to pull it out of people.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. There's a lot of talk about social media today. There's 340 million people plus on Facebook and 80 million plus on Twitter, and you're not on Facebook, right?
I was there very briefly, but
okay.
None of the pictures of me are worth showing anybody. So. My evil twin is on the brochure.
There's this notion I've heard a lot that these social networks, they're not just users, they're not just signups. They're spending 6 billion minutes a day on them. That they're going to replace. There's a belief they're going to replace search engines. I mean, if you can go on and you can do a search and ask a question to your 2,000 friends, it seems like you'd get a more personal, more genuine response than 10 results.
Yeah, we chatted about this when we were talking, and I got to thinking about it. I have never tweeted. It would never occur to me that you want to know what I'm doing at that level. And I actually don't want to be, a slave. And I am a slave to email. Some of the folks who work for me are here.